By the start of 2000, Silicon Valley had become the focus of a giant financial boom. Wall Street banks were pouring millions of dollars into small companies that they knew were unlikely to ever make any real profit. Their real aim was to create massive share price rises when they took the companies public on the stock exchange. But then the bubble suddenly burst. Companies that only weeks before had been valued at billions of dollars disappeared overnight. Their technology auctioned off in fire sales.
We have $100,000 computers with 8 processors and 10 hard drives and just decked out with gigs of RAM, and that stuff's going for 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar.
Google managed to survive, but the crash meant that they met the power of money, which was going to reshape their aims completely. The venture capitalists who had invested in the company now had the upper hand. They told Sergey Brin that he had to find a way to make money, and quickly. And a sense of emergency gripped Google. But then they found the solution. Every time someone searched the web, they left trails behind them, traces as they traveled through the internet. Up to this point, that mass of data had simply been used to make the system of giving people information more efficient. But now, the company's engineers realized that if they gathered enough of it together, they could build up a picture of how every individual behaved, and how they were likely to behave in the future. It meant they could predict what advertisement an individual would click on and respond to, without having to ask them anything. Google started to tell advertisers that they had found a way of replacing the hit and miss of old advertising with a new scientific certainty. And very quickly, they began to make millions of dollars. But there was a problem. What Google were doing was gathering vast amounts of data on millions of people without them being fully aware of it. And by 2001, the Federal Trade Commission was preparing a law which would stop much of what they were doing. But then suddenly, many of those problems disappeared.
But the entire, at least as far as I can see, the top half of the building, at least half of it, I think people know that, half of it just started with a gigantic rumble.
The attacks on September the 11th shocked America because no one had seen them coming. The phrase constantly used was, "We failed to join up the dots." And in the state of fear, the government passed the Patriot Act. It said that everyone's personal data must be open to examination to stop further attacks. Privacy of the individual now became irrelevant in the face of a much higher need: security. It meant that the very thing that Google had invented, looking for patterns in a mass of data, now became central to the security of the United States. And the threat of new laws to stop Google collecting as much data on people as they wanted faded away. The shock of the attacks of 9/11 began a shift away from the individualism that had been at the center of America since the 1950s. And Google was going to become central to that shift. Because rather than doing what they had originally dreamed of, giving people data so they could make their own stories, what Google were now doing was taking people's data and using it to predict what those individuals would do, without having to ask them anything. What they thought or felt as individuals, and the stories they told themselves, was completely irrelevant. Consciousness was being sidelined even more.